You log into your retirement account on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The number on the screen has 2 commas in it now. $2 million. Your first instinct isn't relief. It's the urge to tell someone, your sister, your golf buddy, the group chat. But here's what nobody warns you about the moment you cross that line. The hardest part of building $2 million isn't building it. It's staying quiet about it afterward. For most of your life, money was something you talked about freely, because there wasn't much of it to protect. A raise was good news you shared at dinner. A bonus was something you mentioned at the office. But somewhere past a certain number, the rules change. And almost nobody tells you when that line gets crossed. Think about what actually happens the first time you tell someone you've retired with $2 million saved. Watch their face. There's a flicker before the smile. That flicker is the moment you stop being just you and start being a number in their head. From then on, every conversation carries a second layer underneath it. This isn't paranoia. It's documented behavior. Researchers Philip Brickman, Dan Coates, and Ronnie Janoff-Bullman studied lottery winners back in 1978 and found something that still holds up in wealth psychology today. Sudden, visible financial windfalls don't just change the winner's life. They change how everyone around that winner behaves toward them, often within weeks. Requests appear. Old friendships shift weight. Family gatherings start carrying an unspoken agenda. The money didn't change who you are. It changed how you're seen, and that's a very different problem. Thomas Stanley spent decades studying actual millionaires for his book, The Millionaire Next Door. And one finding surprised almost everyone who read it. The people who actually held on to wealth for the long term weren't the ones driving the loudest cars or wearing the most visible brands. They were the ones living in modest homes, driving older vehicles, and staying almost invisible in their own neighborhoods. Stanley called this behavior living below your means. But there's a second, quieter half of that finding people forget. These millionaires weren't just spending below their means. They were talking about their money below their means too. Silence was part of the strategy, not an accident of personality. There's a reason for that, and it isn't shame. It's a well-documented piece of social psychology called social comparison theory, first described by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954. Festinger's research showed that people constantly, often unconsciously, measure their own standing against the people around them. When you announce that you've hit $2 million, you're not just sharing a fact. You're resetting the measuring stick for every single person who hears it. Suddenly, your brother-in-law's retirement account feels smaller to him. Your coworker's decision to keep working feels like a mistake to her. You didn't do anything to them. Your number did. So let's walk through what actually happens after you tell people. First comes the questions, usually framed as curiosity. How did you do it? What's your portfolio look like? Should I move my money where you moved yours? These feel harmless, and mostly they are. But underneath the questions is a quieter shift. You've become the reference point in rooms you used to just belong to. Then come the requests. And these rarely arrive labeled as requests. A cousin mentions they're a little behind on rent, right after asking how retirement is treating you. A friend just wants your opinion on a business idea that happens to need funding. Family financial exploitation researchers who study elder abuse have flagged this exact pattern for years. It isn't usually strangers who target newly wealthy retirees. According to data tracked by the National Council on Aging and echoed in FBI Internet Crime Complaint reports, the people most likely to financially exploit someone with visible new wealth are often people already inside their trusted circle, because trust is what makes the request feel reasonable instead of suspicious. Then comes something even harder to name: the distance. Not conflict exactly, just a quiet cooling. Conversations that used to be about shared memories start circling back to your finances. Invitations feel different, colored by an assumption about who's picking up the bill now. Nobody says it out loud, but the friendship has a new variable in it. And variables change equations. There's a psychological reason this distance is so hard to reverse once it starts. And it comes down to something Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman spent his career studying: loss aversion. Kahneman's research showed that people feel the pain of losing something roughly twice as intensely as they feel the pleasure of gaining something equivalent. Apply that to your new financial reputation. Once people know you have $2 million, saying no to a request doesn't register to them as you protecting your retirement. It registers as them losing access to something they'd already started to picture as available. You haven't taken anything from anyone, but their brain doesn't process it that way, and that mismatch is where most of the resentment quietly comes from. Now picture the version of this that plays out slower, over years instead of weeks. A financial advisor you've never used calls out of nowhere because somebody mentioned your name at a dinner party. A distant relative resurfaces around the holidays for the first time since a wedding a decade ago. Your own adult children start wondering, even if they never ask directly, what an inheritance conversation might look like. And that wondering changes how openly they talk to you about their own struggles. None of this makes you a victim. It just confirms what the research already suggested. Once a number is known, it starts doing social work on its own, whether you intended it to or not. Here's the counterintuitive twist. You'd think the solution is to be generous immediately, to prove the money hasn't changed you by giving some of it away, fast, to whoever asks first. But research on lottery and windfall recipients consistently shows the opposite works better. The people who preserved both their wealth and their relationships long-term weren't the ones who gave fastest. They were the ones who slowed everything down, said very little at first, and let the initial wave of curiosity pass before making any financial decisions involving other people at all. Silence, in the first year especially, isn't coldness. It's a buffer that protects both the money and the people you actually care about. By keeping requests from turning into resentment when the answer is no. There's also a practical, unglamorous reason wealthy retirees stay quiet that has nothing to do with relationships. It's exposure. Elder, financial fraud specifically targeting retirees who are known or suspected to have significant savings has grown sharply enough that the Federal Trade Commission now tracks it as a distinct category of financial crime, with retirees reporting some of the highest average losses per incident of any age group. Scammers don't need your account number. They just need to know you have money and that you're the type of person willing to talk about it. Every conversation where you mention the number is, technically, market research for somebody. Think about what this means for how you carry the news of hitting $2 million. It doesn't mean isolating yourself or treating everyone around you as a threat. It means understanding that your net worth stopped being a personal milestone the moment it became public information and started being a piece of leverage anyone could pick up. The people who protect wealth long-term aren't secretive because they're cold. They're private because they've learned, usually the hard way, that information about money behaves exactly like money itself. Once it leaves your hands, you don't control where it goes anymore. This shows up everywhere in how genuinely wealthy people actually live. And it's almost never how movies portray it. The loudest displays of money, the exotic cars, the constant flexing online, usually belong to people spending fast to look wealthy, not people who've actually stayed wealthy for decades. Financial researchers who study high net worth households, including the pattern Stanley documented, keep finding the same quiet signature. True financial security tends to look boring from the outside, specifically because looking boring is what keeps it secure. And this isn't just an old money habit anymore. Ask anyone paying attention to wealth culture right now, and they'll point to the same shift happening in real time. What used to be called keeping a low profile has a name today. Stealth wealth, sometimes described as quiet luxury, a deliberate move away from visible status symbols. The irony is that this isn't a new trend at all. It's the same instinct Festinger described in 1954, and Stanley documented decades later, just rediscovered by a generation raised on social media. Now realizing that visibility has a cost nobody mentioned until they'd already paid it. So what does staying quiet actually look like in practice once you understand why it matters? It doesn't mean lying to the people closest to you. And it doesn't mean refusing to celebrate a milestone you spent decades earning. It means separating two things that feel identical in the moment but aren't. The achievement, which is yours to feel proud of privately, and the number, which almost never needs to leave the room. You can tell your spouse everything. You can tell a fee-only financial advisor everything, because their entire incentive is keeping that information confidential and working for you. What changes is the reflex to mention the figure itself in casual conversation. At the exact moment, it would do the most social damage and the least personal good. The people who keep both their money and their relationships intact aren't secretive by nature. They've simply learned to ask one quiet question before they speak. Does saying this number out loud actually serve me, or does it just serve the moment? So you log into that account again next Tuesday. The number is still there, maybe a little higher. And this time, you don't open the group chat. Not because you're hiding, and not because you don't trust the people in your life. It's because you finally understand what that flicker on someone's face actually meant the first time you told them. $2 million didn't just change your bank balance. It changed what your silence is worth. And the retirees who keep both their money and their relationships intact are the ones who figured out early that the smartest financial decision they'd make after hitting the number wasn't where to invest it. It was deciding who never needed to know the number at all.